Hey kiddos, welcome to our A.I.R prep practice. If you're watching this video, you should have already read the two stories with me in the video previous to this. Kiddos, what we're about ready to do is not fun, okay? We're gonna be completely honest with you. But we have a really important test coming up in 9 days if you're watching this video right now. So you have to learn how to take this test because really it's not super hard if you know how to beat the test. If we know how to beat the test and we put these skills that we're teaching you into practice, you can answer any question with any story that they throw at you. So today it's really important that you follow along with the videos. If I do something, if Mrs. Clark does something, you are doing it too. Because if you don't do those things, you don't become better, and then you don't know how to beat the test. So please, 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 if I circle something, you circle something. If I underline something, you underline something. Those things will make you a better test taker, even when things are super hard. All right, kiddos, let's go ahead and get started. So you need to have out this paper here that says Earthworms and Worm Farm. We already read the story, so if you haven't done that, please go back and rewatch the video that goes along with these questions. I'm going to be working with you on questions 1 through 5, and then you're going to watch another video, and Mrs. Clark is going to be working with you on questions 6 through 10. So we're going to go ahead and get started here on the first question. It says, using information from passage 2. Complete the table by showing the order of the steps needed to make a worm farm. Well, something to be completely clear on. If you don't read this passage 2, you're not even going to know what story to look at. Notice in our story, we have passage 1, which means story 1, and we also have passage 2, which means story 2. This question says passage 2. I don't care about passage 1 at all. I only care about passage 2. So the only story I'm going to be working on with this question is passage 2. So let's look. We have to take these items and we have to put them in order. Step 1, step 2, step 3, and step 4. Let's look at the first thing they have written here. It says the earthworms leave the worm farm. What do you think we should look for? Maybe the word leave. The earthworms are leaving the worm farm. All right, so let's look. We're not going to reread. Let's look for things that talk about something leaving, okay, or something that means to leave. So worms are not only great dancers, they are very important to the environment. Does that tell me they're leaving? No. They change the dead material from plants and animals into nutrients that help plants grow. Does that tell me they're leaving? No. Worms also dig tunnels in the ground, which help the soil breathe. Does that tell me they're leaving? No. Watch them shimmy through their tunnels by creating their very own worm world. Does that tell me they're leaving? No. So I keep going. What to do? Layer the bottom of the glass jar with gravel. Then place several inches of soil on top. Does that tell me they're leaving? No. Sprinkle dead leaves over the soil and moisten with a few drops of water. Does that tell me they're leaving? No. Place the earthworms in the jar. Then put the jar in a very dark place. Does that tell me they're leaving? No. Like a closet or basement? No. Important, do not put a lid on the jar. Does that tell me they're leaving? No. Sprinkle the soil with water every 2 days. Does that tell me they're leaving? No. When you water the soil, check on the worm's progress. Does that tell me they're leaving? No. You'll be able to see the crazy tunnels they've dug. Does that tell me they're leaving? No. After a couple of weeks, bid your slimy friends goodbye and set them free in a garden area. Does that tell me they're leaving? Yes. So please underline this right here. It tells me that they are leaving. There is our first thing on our chart. We can't mark anything. We don't know if that's step 1, 2, 3, or 4 yet. We must find the other choices before we decide. The worm farm goes into a dark place. What do you think we should look for? I think you should look for dark place. Can we please find something that talks about a dark place? Well, let's look. Worms are not only great dancers, No. They are also important to the environment. No. They change the dead material from plants and animals into nutrients that help plants grow. No. Remember, I'm looking for a dark place. Worms also dig tunnels in the ground. No. Which help the soil breathe. No. Watch them shimmy through their tunnels by creating their very own worm world. No. Remember, I'm looking for a dark place. Layer the bottom of the glass jar with gravel. No. Then place several inches of soil on top. No. Sprinkle dead leaves over the soil and moisten with a few drops of water. Does that tell me they're in a dark place? No. Place the earthworms in a jar. No. Then put the jar in a very dark place. Does that answer the question? Yes. So please underline that section. All right, kiddos, let's do the next one. Remember, we cannot choose a step until we've found all of our choices. Food and water go into the worm farm. Well, we need to find something about food and water. So let's look. Worms are not only great dancers. No. They are also important to the environment. No. They change the dead material from plants and animals into nutrients that help plants grow. No. Worms also dig tunnels in the ground. No. Which helps the soil breathe. No. Remember, we're looking for food and water. Watch them shimmy through their tunnels by creating their very own worm world. No. Layer the bottom of the glass jar with gravel. No. Then place several inches of soil on top. No. Sprinkle dead leaves over the soil and moisten with a few drops of water. Does that tell me food and water? Well, what do they eat? We know they eat dead leaves, and we need to moisten with a few drops of water. So that does tell me right there what they eat. They eat dead leaves, and we moisten with a few drops of water. All right, we're still not done. It says tunnels can be seen inside the worm farm. We are looking for tunnels inside the worm farm. So let's go ahead and look. We are looking for tunnels inside the worm farm. Now, I would be very cautious here because it says worms also dig tunnels in the ground. Is that inside the worm farm? No. If you've realized, all of this is talking about the worm farm. So let's look and see where it talks about tunnels. Layer the bottom of the glass jar with gravel. No. Then place several inches of soil on top. No. Sprinkle dead leaves over the soil and moisten with a few drops of water. No. Place the earthworms in a jar. No. Remember, we're looking for tunnels. Then put the jar in a very dark place. No. Like a closet or basement. No. Important. Do not put a lid on the jar. No. Sprinkle the soil with water every 2 days. No. When you water the soil, check on your worm's progress. No. You'll be able to see the crazy tunnels they've dug. Yes. Right there it is. So, that took a while. You're right. It wasn't very fun. But now I am able to decide what steps go in what order. When I have highlighted this, now you can't write on the A.I.R test, but you can highlight. So be very cautious. This one was number 1. This one was number 2. This one was number 3. And this one was number 4. So let's look at our story. The earthworms leave the worm farm. Which one was that? Was that step 1, step 2, step 3, or step 4? Well, you wrote right here that they leave. That was step 4. So on this paper, we are going to mark that that was step 4. The next one, the worm farm goes into a dark place. What number did we put by dark place? Dark place. We put a number 2. So that will get a number 2. All right, which one talks about food and water going into a worm farm? Well, that's sprinkling the dead leaves. We put a number 1. So that gets a number 1. It says tunnels can be seen inside the worm farm. Where did we talk about tunnels? Tunnels. We put a number 3. So that will get a step 3. All right, kiddos, you should have picked all of those answers. Make sure you have done everything I've asked of you. Let's look at number 2. It says, read the sentence from passage 1. Please notice it says passage 1. That means story 1. Worms have a more noble purpose than snagging some fish off the end of the dock. That was found in paragraph 1. What is the meaning of the word noble as it is used in this sentence? They have given you all of these choices. What we do is we will put these words in that sentence. We will try to narrow down what are good choices and what are bad choices. First, we will start with the word easy. Let's see how that sounds. Worms have a more easy purpose than snagging some fish off the end of the dock. How does that sound? Well, maybe. Let's leave that one. Let's try another one. Important. Worms have a more important purpose than snagging some fish off the end of the dock. How does that sound? That one sounds okay. Let's leave it. Quiet. Worms have a more quiet purpose than snagging some fish off the end of the dock. Does that make sense? No, I don't really think that's a good choice. The word quiet in that sentence does not sound very well. All right, your next word is scary. Let's put that in the sentence and see if that makes sense. Worms have a more scary purpose than snagging some fish off the end of a dock. Were we talking about scary worms in our story? No, that doesn't make sense either. So we have eliminated 2 choices. Which one sounds the best? Worms have a more easy purpose than snagging some fish off the end of the dock, or worms have a more important purpose than snagging some fish off the end of the dock. If you said that the word important sounds the best, you are correct. The word easy does not make as much sense as the word important. All right, kiddos, let's go ahead and turn our page to number 3. It says, what is the main idea in passage 2? There's a couple things that you need to be aware of. Number 1, what is main idea? What is the main idea? Well, in my classroom, this is how we learn main idea. I say, what is the main idea? My students say, the main idea is what the whole story's about. What is main idea? What the whole story's about. So when we talk about main idea, we are saying what the whole story's about. So I want to know about the whole story. I don't want to know about a piece of the story. I want to know the whole story. Now, which story do they care about? They care about passage 2. They do not care about passage 1. Notice, if I look in passage 1, it would not be correct. They want to know about passage 2. All right, so in your own words, what would you say passage 2 is about? Well, it's talking up here about worms and what they do. They dig tunnels and things like that. But then down here, it tells me how to make a worm farm. So it gives me the directions on a worm farm. Then it tells me what I need for a worm farm. So what is this whole story about? Because main idea means what the whole story's about. So let's read our choices. Was that whole story about earthworms are nature's recyclers? Maybe. Let's leave that one. B, worms are great dancers. Was that whole story about worms being great dancers? No, that's ridiculous. Choice C, steps to make a worm farm. Was the whole story about a worm farm and making one? That could be a good idea. Let's leave that one. Choice D says, how to make an ant farm. Was the story about an ant farm? No, I can tell from the title. I'm not even talking about ants. I'm talking about worms. So D is a horrible choice. All right, so what is the best choice? Is it about earthworms are nature's recyclers or steps to make a worm farm? Well, here, passage 1 says, earthworms, nature's recyclers. If I wasn't paying attention, I may choose choice A. But that's not a good choice. That's about passage 1. They want to know about passage 2. So that is not the right choice. Sometimes they try to trick you to see if you are paying attention. Were you paying attention? All right, kiddos, let's go ahead and look at number 4. It says, which statement describes the author's point of view in passage 2? Again, we are working with passage 2. We are not working with passage 1. They want to know the author's point of view. Well, what does that mean? Point of view is why the author wrote passage 2. Why or what was the purpose of passage 2? So let's look at passage 2. Remember what we said we read about. We read about how to make a worm farm and what we would need. We also read that worms are not only great dancers, they are also important to the environment. They change dead material from plants and animals into nutrients that help plants grow. Worms also dig tunnels in the ground, which help the soil breathe. Watch them shimmy through their tunnels by creating their very own worm world. So let's look and see. Why did they write passage 2? Did they write passage 2 because earthworms are good to have as pets? Did this story ever tell us that we should have worms as pets? No, that's a horrible choice. Let's cross that off. All right, B, building an earthworm farm is hard work. Is that true? Do you think building an earthworm thing is hard work? Maybe. Let's leave that one and come back to it. Keeping earthworms in a jar is dangerous. Did anything in this story tell us that keeping earthworms in a jar is dangerous? No, that's not true. So now we have it down to 2 choices. Let's read choice D. Watching earthworms dig tunnels is interesting. Do you think that this story is about watching earthworms dig tunnels because they are interesting? Well, it does talk about tunnels here and in the ground, which the soil is to breathe. It also talks down here about tunnels and watching them. So, which one would you choose? Do you think building an earthworm farm is hard work? Or do you think watching earthworms dig tunnels is interesting? I would say that the right choice is D, and here is why. I don't believe that building an earthworm is hard work. I don't think it would take much work at all, honestly, to build a earthworm farm. That is why choice B is wrong, because it is pretty easy to build an earthworm farm. So D is the correct answer. All right, kiddos, we are down to my last question, but it is a hard one. Let's go ahead and work hard on this question because we really want to pass the A.I.R. It says, complete the table to show which information about tunnels is found in each passage. Now, they have given us these things here. We have to find, is it in passage 1? Is it in both of the passages? Or is it just in passage 2? Now, if you're using a marker, I would get out a different color that we haven't used because this can be super confusing. On the A.I.R test, when you do questions like this, you want to clear all of your highlighting because otherwise you're going to get confused about what you're looking at and what you're not. So on questions like this, when we have already highlighted certain things in the story, you again want to clear all highlighting so that it's not super confusing. All right, kiddos, let's look. Tunnels help soil to breathe. Now, let's find a word in the story. Let's find the word breathe. Tunnels help to breathe. You have to look in passage 1. You have to look because it might be in this passage. It might be in this passage. It's allowed to be in just passage 1. It's allowed to be just in passage 2. But it's also allowed to be in both passages. So let's see if we find anything about tunnels helping soil to breathe. Let's see. What comes to mind when you think about worms? No. Creepy and crawly and slimy? No. Good to put on the end of a fish hook? No. What else? Worms have a more noble purpose than snagging some fish off the end of the dock. Is that telling me that they have to breathe? No. Worms have a good job to do, as do all of nature's inhabitants. Does that tell me that tunnels help soil to breathe? No, so we're still looking. Worms are nature's recyclers. No. It's hard to tell by looking at them. No. But worms have mouths and they love to eat. No. Earthworms eat dead and decaying matter like leaves, grass, and even garbage. No. Earthworms eat the debris lying at the top of the ground, and then they dig the dirt, making small tunnels. Well, that talks about small tunnels. This question says tunnels help soil to breathe. But did that tell me that tunnels help soil to breathe? No, not at all. So I can't use that. These tiny burrows help water to soak into the ground and make it easier for plants to grow. Does that tell me that tunnels are breathing? No. Worms also leave behind droppings called castings. Does that tell me that they can breathe? No. Castings help plants to grow by creating a rich topsoil that plants like. Does that tell me that it helps them breathe? No. Worms are also a source of food for many other animals, birds, and reptiles. No, I still haven't found it. This is so frustrating, but I have to keep going. Tunnels help soil to breathe. Let's see. Anywhere food and moisture are in the ground, earthworms can be found. No. In some places, like parts of New Zealand and the Netherlands, there can be as many as 6 million worms per acre. Ugh, no. An acre is about the size of a big backyard. That doesn't tell me tunnels breathe. That's a lot of worms. So next time you see a worm, remember, even creatures that seem scary or yucky play an important role in the natural cycle of our environment. Man, I didn't find it anywhere in that story. That's so frustrating. All right, so I didn't find it in that story. So now I have to look. Tunnels help soil to breathe. Let's see if it is in this story. Worms are not only great dancers. No, they are also important to the environment. No, they change dead material from plants and animals and nutrients to help plants grow. No, worms also dig tunnels in the ground, which help the soil breathe. Whoa, I found it. They help soil to breathe. Highlight it. So what story did I find it in? Did I find it in passage 1? No. Did I find it in passage 2? Yes, I sure did. So let's look at this question. Did I find it in passage 1? No, I don't mark it. Did I find it in both of them? Did I find it in 1 and 2? No, I found it in passage 2. So I will just mark passage 2. All right, let's look at our next one. Tunnels help water soak into the ground. Let's talk about water soaking into the ground. So we need to see if we can find that tunnels help water soak into the ground. We again have to go back to this section of the story. We have to go back to passage 1 to see if we can find that in passage 1. Again, we are looking for tunnels helping water to soak. Let's look. What comes to mind when you think about worms? No. Creepy, crawly, and slimy. No. Good to put on the end of a fish hook. No. What else? No. Worms have a more noble purpose than snagging some fish off the end of the hook. No. Worms have a job to do. No. Do all of nature's inhabitants. No. Worms are nature's recyclers. No. We are looking for tunnels help water soak. It's hard to tell by looking at them, but earthworms have mouths and they love to eat. No. Earthworms eat dead and decaying matter like leaves, grass, and even garbage. No. Earthworms eat the debris lying at the top of the ground. No. Then they dig in the dirt, making small tunnels. No. These tiny burrows help water to soak into the ground. Hey, right here. They're talking about water soaking into the ground. All right, we found it in passage 1. But that doesn't mean we're done. We also have to look in passage 2. Let's look in passage 2. Worms are not only great dancers. No. They also are important to the environment. No. They change the dead material from plants and animals into nutrients to help plants grow. No. Remember, we're looking for tunnels help water soak into the ground. Worms dig tunnels in the ground, which help the soil breathe. No. Watch them shimmy through their tunnels by creating your own worm world. No. So, all of those are about digging tunnels. We have to keep reading and see, does it? Tunnels help water soak into the ground. Let's see. Layer the bottom of the glass jar with gravel, then place the several inches of soil on top. No. Sprinkle dead leaves over the soil and moisten with a few drops of water. No. Remember, we are looking for tunnels and water soaking into the ground. Place the earthworms in a jar. No. Then put the jar in a very dark place. No. Like a closet or basement. No. Important, do not put a lid on the jar. No. Sprinkle the soil with water every 2 days. No. When you water the soil, check on the worm's progress. No. You'll be able to see the crazy tunnels they dug. No, that's still not about. Tunnels help water soak. All right. After a couple weeks, bid your slimy friends goodbye and set them free in a garden area. No. So, where did I find this? Where did I find tunnels help water soak? In passage 1, in both, or in passage 2? Well, we found it right here. These tiny burrows help water to soak. That is in passage number 1. So, we will mark that that was found in passage 1. All right, let's look at the next one. Tunnels make it easier for plants to grow. So we are looking to see if tunnels help them grow. Let's look for something that talks about plants growing. All right, let's see. Plants growing. First, we will start in passage 1. You guys are doing so good. Remember, we can do this even though it's hard. So let's look. Let's talk. We have to find that they help plants to grow. What comes to mind when you think about worms? No. Creepy, crawly, and slimy. No. Good to put on the end of a fish hook? No. What else? No. Worms have a more noble purpose than snagging some fish off the end of the dock. No. Worms have a job to do, as do all of nature's inhabitants. Is that about tunnels make it easier for plants to grow? No. Let's keep going. Worms are nature's recyclers. No. It's hard to tell by looking at them, but earthworms have mouths and love to eat. No. Earthworms eat dead and decaying matter like leaves, grass, and even garbage. No. Earthworms eat the debris lying near the top of the ground. No. Then they dig into the dirt, making small tunnels. No. These tiny burrows help water to soak into the ground. No. Making it easier for plants to grow. Look, plants to grow. Yes, I found it in passage 1. Awesome. Now I have to see if it talks about plants to grow in passage 2. Let's look. Worms are not only great dancers, they also are important to the environment. Does that tell me that plants to grow? No. All right, let's keep going. They change the dead material from plants and animals into nutrients that help plants grow. Whoa, I found it in this one too. They help plants grow. So, which one will I choose? Passage 1, both, or passage 2? Well, look. Help plants grow. Help plants grow. It is in both of those stories. All right, kiddos, if you need to take a break because that was a really long, take a break, get a snack, walk around the house a little bit, and then please go and watch Mrs. Clark's video where she will help you do questions 6 through 10. Thank you so much for following along and doing exactly what I did. Because if you're doing exactly what I'm doing, you're going to rock this test. See you soon.